The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Eliza Tucker stepped off the stagecoach, her arrival in Copper Creek causing every head to turn. It wasn't just her fine Eastern clothes or the determined tilt of her chin that caught attention, it was the way she carried herself, like a woman who knew her own power in a world ruled by men. The year was 1878, and the mining town of Copper Creek was still raw around the edges, a place where fortunes were made and lost between sunrise and sunset. Eliza had come for neither gold nor silver, but for something far more precious, a fresh start. "Madam, your luggage," the driver called out, tossing down a worn leather trunk that had seen better days. "Thank you," Eliza replied, her voice carrying the refined accent of Boston society that seemed as out of place in this dusty settlement as a silk ribbon on a rattlesnake. She surveyed the town's main street with clear green eyes that missed nothing: the saloon already busy despite the early hour, the general store with its faded awning, the blacksmith's forge belching smoke. Men paused in their work to stare at her, some tipping their hats in courtesy, others making no effort to hide their blatant interest. "Need some help with that trunk, miss?" a voice drawled from her left. Eliza turned to face a man lounging against a hitching post. He wasn't particularly tall, but there was a hardness to him that spoke of years spent under harsh conditions. His clothes were dusty from the trail, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "I can manage, thank you," she replied coolly. The man pushed his hat back, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Suit yourself. Just seemed mighty heavy for a lady." "I've carried heavier burdens," she said, gripping the handle of her trunk and starting toward the hotel. The stranger's low chuckle followed her. "I don't doubt that for a minute." Eliza ignored him and continued on her way, feeling the weight of curious stares from the boardwalk and through dusty windows. She'd expected this. A woman traveling alone to a frontier town was bound to create gossip. What she hadn't expected was the electric awareness that had shot through her when the stranger's eyes had met hers. It didn't matter. She hadn't come to Copper Creek looking for a man's attention. She'd had quite enough of that in Boston. The lobby of the Copper Creek Hotel was mercifully cool after the blazing heat outside. A balding man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from behind the reception desk. "Good afternoon. I'd like a room, please," Eliza said, setting down her trunk. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "On your own, miss." "Yes, is that a problem?" Her tone made it clear that it had better not be. "No, no problem at all, just unusual. We don't get many unaccompanied ladies in Copper Creek." He pushed the register toward her. "Name, Eliza Tucker," she signed with a flourish. "Purpose of your visit?" he asked, more out of curiosity than any official requirement. Eliza hesitated only briefly. "Business. I'm opening a millinery shop." The clerk's eyebrows climbed higher. "A hat shop? Here?" "Yes, here." She met his skeptical look with unwavering confidence. "Even frontier towns need hats, mister." "Perkins, Harold Perkins." He handed her a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. Breakfast is served from 6 to 8, dinner's extra." "Thank you, Mr. Perkins." As she turned to retrieve her trunk, she found it already being lifted by the same man she'd encountered outside. "I insist," he said, his voice low and rough like whiskey over gravel. "Hotel stairs are treacherous with baggage." Eliza wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance she'd come so far to establish, but practicality won out. "Very well, thank you, Mr. Kincaid, Quentin Kincaid." His mouth quirked into something not quite a smile. "Most folks just call me Quinn. Quinn Kincaid." The name suited him straightforward, yet somehow mysterious. Eliza nodded and preceded him up the stairs, acutely aware of his presence behind her. At her door, she turned to take the key from her pocket, and he set the trunk down with a careful thud. "So, Miss Tucker," he said, straightening to his full height. "A millinery shop, huh?" Surprise flashed across her face. "You were eavesdropping, Mr. Kincaid." Small lobby, hard not to hear. He shrugged unapologetically. "Copper Creek's a mining town." Most women here either work the saloon or are married to minors, not much call for fancy bonnets. Perhaps that's precisely why there should be. Good day, Mr. Kincaid. She unlocked her door and made to enter. One more thing, Miss Tucker, he said, causing her to pause. Word travels fast in small towns. Whatever you're running from it might just catch up to you here. Eliza's spine stiffened. I'm not running from anything. Quinn Kincaid's storm-gray eyes studied her face. Everyone in the West is running from something, it's just a matter of what. With a tip of his hat, he turned and descended the stairs, boots echoing on the wooden treads. Eliza closed the door firmly behind her, leaning against it as her heart hammered in her chest. How could he have guessed? She'd been so careful, planning her escape from Boston with meticulous attention to detail. No one knew she was here, not her family, not her friends, and certainly not Richard Harrington, whose unwanted attentions had driven her to flee. She crossed to the window and looked out over the main street of Copper Creek. The town was a far cry from Boston's cultured avenues, but it offered something Boston couldn't: freedom from her past. A movement caught her eye. Quinn Kincaid was crossing the street, heading toward the saloon. There was something in his easy, confident stride that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. A man who knew his place in the world. Eliza let the curtain fall back into place. Quinn Kincaid was exactly the sort of man she needed to avoid: perceptive, direct, and far too attractive for her peace of mind. She had work to do. The next morning, Eliza rose with the sun. She dressed with care in a practical blue dress, her auburn hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. Today, she would secure a location for her shop and begin ordering supplies. Breakfast in the hotel dining room was simple but hearty: eggs, bacon, and biscuits with gravy. She ate alone, ignoring the curious glances from the other diners, mostly men heading out to the mines or the ranches surrounding Copper Creek. Morning, Miss Tucker. Quinn Kincaid slid into the chair across from her without waiting for an invitation. He was freshly shaved, his dark hair still damp, but his clothes were the same trail-worn gear of yesterday. Mr. Kincaid, she acknowledged stiffly. I don't recall inviting you to join me. You didn't. He signaled to the waitress for coffee. But I figured you could use some advice about setting up shop, and I happen to know which buildings are available for rent. Eliza narrowed her eyes. And how would you know that? I know a lot of things about Copper Creek. The waitress set a cup in front of him, and he thanked her with a smile that transformed his rugged face. I've been here since the beginning. You're a miner then? She asked, surprising herself with her curiosity. Now I run a small ranch outside of town. He took a sip of his coffee. Raise horses. Eliza found that easy to believe. There was something untamed about Quinn Kincaid that reminded her of the wild Mustangs she'd seen on her journey west. So these available buildings, she prompted, deciding to use his knowledge to her advantage, even if she didn't entirely trust his motives. Quinn leaned back in his chair. There's a storefront available next to the general store. Used to be a barber shop until old Pete Jenkins lost his eyesight. Good location, gets plenty of foot traffic. That sounds promising. Who owns it? Hiram Stillwell. Owns half the town, truth be told. Quinn's expression darkened slightly. He's not the easiest man to deal with, but he's fair in his way. Eliza nodded, mentally calculating the money she'd brought with her. And where would I find Mr. Stillwell? He'll be in his office above the bank around 9. Quinn studied her face. You really serious about this hat shop? Perfectly serious, Mr. Kincaid. Why does that surprise you so much? He shrugged. Just trying to figure you out, Miss Tucker. Most women who come west on their own are looking for a husband or running from trouble. You don't strike me as the husband-hunting type. And what type do I strike you as? She asked before she could stop herself. His gray eyes held hers. The kind that's used to getting her own way, the kind that's got secrets. He stood up, leaving a coin on the table for his coffee. When you're done with Stillwell, come by the Mercantile. Marshall Cooper's wife might have some fabric you could use to get started. With that, he left, leaving Eliza unsettled by his perception and annoyed at her own reaction to him. By midday, Eliza had secured the storefront next to Cooper's general store. Hiram Stillwell had indeed been difficult but not impossible to negotiate with. She'd agreed to 3 months' rent in advance, which had nearly depleted her funds, but she was confident that once her supplies arrived from Denver, she could begin turning a profit. The space itself was small but adequate, with large windows facing the street and enough room for a counter, work table, and display area. It would need cleaning and a fresh coat of paint, but Eliza could already envision the shop she would create. As she stood in the empty space, the door creaked open behind her. She turned, expecting to see Quinn Kincaid again, but instead found a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a practical dress. "Miss Tucker, I'm Sarah Cooper. My husband owns the mercantile next door," she offered a warm smile. "Quinn mentioned you might need some help getting started." Eliza returned the smile, genuinely pleased to meet another woman. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Cooper. I've just leased this space for a millinery shop." Sarah looked around appraisingly. "It's a good location. Gets plenty of sunlight for your work, too." She set a basket on the counter. "I brought some cleaning supplies. Thought we might get started right away. This town could use a touch of feminine refinement." For the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, Eliza felt a sense of welcome. "I'd appreciate the help immensely." The two women spent the afternoon scrubbing floors and washing windows. Sarah proved to be a font of information about Copper Creek and its residents. "The town's growing," she explained as they worked. "The mines are producing well, and more families are settling here. There's even talk of building a proper schoolhouse by next year." "And what about Mr. Kincaid?" Eliza asked, trying to sound casual. "He seems to know everyone in town." Sarah smiled knowingly. "Quinn's been here almost from the beginning. Came to work the mines like most, but he was smarter than most. Saved his money, bought land when it was cheap. Now he's got one of the better horse ranches in the territory. He doesn't strike me as a typical rancher." "There's nothing typical about Quinn Kincaid," Sarah agreed. "He reads more books than anyone I know, orders them special from back east, and he's got a way with horses that's almost magical, can calm the wildest Mustang with just his voice." Eliza found this information oddly compelling. "Is he married?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Sarah's eyes twinkled. "No, though not for lack of opportunities. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him. Some say he's married to that ranch of his." She paused in her scrubbing. "Quinn's a good man, Miss Tucker, one of the best. But he's got shadows in his past, like most who come west." "I'm not interested in Mr. Kincaid's past," Eliza said quickly. "Or his present, for that matter. I'm here to establish my business, not to find a husband." "Of course," Sarah said, but her smile suggested she didn't entirely believe it. "Now, about these shelves. I think my husband could help reinforce them for your display." By the end of the week, the shop was clean, painted a fresh cream color, and ready for stock. Sarah had indeed been invaluable, not only with the physical work, but in introducing Eliza to other residents of Copper Creek. The town's reception of her had been mixed, some welcoming, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile to the idea of an unmarried Eastern woman setting up shop on her own. The most vocal of these was Wilhelmina Greaves, the widow who ran the town's only boarding house. She had made it clear during their brief introduction that she considered Eliza's presence in Copper Creek inappropriate and potentially disruptive. "Single women bringing Eastern ideas to frontier towns, it never ends well," she had sniffed before marching away. Eliza had merely lifted her chin higher. She was used to disapproval. It had followed her in Boston, too, where her refusal to marry Richard Harrington despite her family's wishes had caused no end of scandal. She was arranging the bolts of fabric Sarah had helped her acquire when the shop door opened, setting the small bell she'd hung jingling. Quinn Kincaid filled the doorframe, hat in hand, looking slightly uncomfortable in the feminine surroundings. "Mr. Kincaid," she acknowledged, setting down the blue satin she'd been measuring. "What brings you to my shop?" just checking to see if you need anything." His eyes roamed the transformed space with obvious approval. "Place looks good. Sarah said you've been working from dawn till dusk. There's much to do before I can open properly." Eliza moved behind the counter, putting a barrier between them. "My supplies from Denver should arrive on next week's stage," Quinn nodded, turning his hat in his hands. "I came to invite you to the town social on Saturday night. Happens once a month at the schoolhouse. Everyone will be there." Eliza hesitated. A social meant dancing, and dancing meant close contact with the men of Copper Creek. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. Seeing her hesitation, Quinn added, "It would be a good way to meet potential customers. Most of the town's womenfolk will be there." Put that way, it made good business sense. "Very well, thank you for the invitation." "I'll pick you up at 7, he said, settling his hat back on his head. "That won't be necessary. I'm perfectly capable of walking to the schoolhouse on my own." Something flashed in his eyes, amusement or annoyance, she couldn't tell. "It's not about capability, Miss Tucker. It's about propriety and safety. Not all the minors in town are gentlemen, especially after they've had a few drinks at Sweeney's before the social." Eliza wanted to argue, but she recognized the wisdom in his words. Copper Creek wasn't Boston. "Very well, Mr. Kincaid. 7 o'clock. After he left, Eliza found herself looking forward to Saturday evening with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She told herself it was purely for business reasons to introduce herself to potential customers, but a small, honest part of her acknowledged that she was curious about Quinn Kincaid and the effect he had on her. Saturday evening arrived clear and warm, the last light of day painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Eliza dressed with care in one of her better gowns, a deep green silk that complemented her auburn hair and fair skin. It was perhaps more formal than the occasion called for, but she wanted to make a good impression on the women who might become her customers. Precisely at 7, a knock sounded at her hotel room door. She opened it to find Quinn Kincaid standing there in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and trousers that, while not new, had been pressed for the occasion. His dark hair was combed back from his forehead, and he'd trimmed his beard. The overall effect was striking. "Miss Tucker," he said, his eyes widening slightly as they took in her appearance. That is, green suits you." "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid." She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. "You clean up rather nicely yourself." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Don't get used to it. Tomorrow it's back to ranch dust and horse sweat." The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, but tonight it had been transformed. Paper lanterns hung from the porch eaves, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Inside, the desks had been pushed against the walls to create a dance floor, and a small group of musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica played lively tunes in the corner. The room was already crowded when they arrived, and conversation momentarily faltered as heads turned to observe Eliza's entrance on Quinn's arm. She felt the weight of curious stares and lifted her chin, meeting them with the poise she'd learned in Boston society. "Quinn, you made it." A burly man with a magnificent mustache clapped Kincaid on the shoulder. "And you brought the new lady in town." "Madam, I'm Sheriff Thomas Blackburn." He tipped his hat to Eliza. "Miss Eliza Tucker," Quinn introduced her. "She's opening a millinery shop next to Cooper's." "A hat shop." "Well, that'll be something new for Copper Creek." The sheriff's friendly eyes crinkled. "My wife will be pleased. She's always complaining about having to order her hats from Denver." "I hope to satisfy her requirements, Sheriff," Eliza replied with a smile. Quinn led her further into the room, introducing her to various townspeople. Sarah Cooper greeted her warmly and introduced her to other wives and daughters. The reception was generally friendly, though Eliza noticed Wilhelmina Greaves holding court in the corner, casting disapproving glances in her direction. "Don't mind Widow Greaves," Quinn murmured, following her gaze. "She disapproves of pretty much everyone and everything that's happened since 1850. I'm quite accustomed to disapproval, Mr. Kincaid, Eliza assured him. I bet you are, he replied with that almost smile that seemed to suggest he knew more about her than he should. The musicians struck up a lively reel and couples moved to the center of the room. Dance with me, Quinn said, extending his hand. It wasn't exactly a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Eliza hesitated, then placed her gloved hand in his. One dance, Mr. Kincaid. One dance turned into three, and Eliza found herself enjoying Quinn's company more than she'd anticipated. He was a surprisingly good dancer, moving with the same fluid grace he showed in everything he did. More surprising was his conversation intelligent, often witty, and showing a breadth of knowledge she hadn't expected from a frontier rancher. They were taking a break, sipping punch near the open doors to catch the evening breeze, when a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A man Eliza hadn't seen before staggered in, clearly drunk. He was tall and powerfully built, with a shock of red hair and a face flushed with alcohol. There she is, he slurred loudly, pointing directly at Eliza. The high and mighty Boston lady, Quinn tensed beside her. Damnation, he muttered. That's Bart Donovan, works one of the outlying claims, has a reputation for trouble when he drinks. How does he know where I'm from? Eliza whispered, feeling a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Before Quinn could answer, Bart lurched toward them. Heard all about you. Running from some rich fella back east who wanted to marry you. Too good for him, were you? Too good for us simple miners too, I reckon. The room had fallen silent, all eyes now on Eliza and the drunk miner. She felt herself pale but kept her composure. Sir, you are mistaken and clearly intoxicated. I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself further. Don't you talk down to me. Bart advanced another step, and Eliza could smell the whiskey on his breath. They're saying you're a temptress. Leading men on and then running when they want to make an honest woman of you. Quinn stepped between them, his body tense with controlled anger. That's enough, Donovan. You're drunk. Go home and sleep it off. Out of my way, Kincaid. This ain't your business. Bart tried to shove past him, but Quinn stood firm. I'm making it my business, Quinn said, his voice dangerously quiet. Miss Tucker is under my protection. You insult her, you answer to me. The sheriff pushed through the crowd. That's enough, Donovan. You're disturbing the peace again. I'm taking you to the jail to cool off. She's a temptress, Bart shouted as the sheriff and another man dragged him toward the door. Ask anyone in Boston. Ask Richard Harrington. At the name, Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. How could he possibly know about Richard? She'd been so careful. Quinn turned to her, concern etched in his features. Eliza, are you all right? It was the first time he'd used her given name, and somehow that small intimacy, combined with the shock of hearing Richard's name, was too much. I need air, she managed, and fled through the open doors onto the schoolhouse porch. The night air was cool on her heated face as she gripped the porch railing, trying to steady her breathing. How had Richard found her, and so quickly? She'd been careful to cover her tracks, telling no one where she was headed. Eliza. Quinn's voice was gentle as he came to stand beside her. Don't let a drunk fool ruin your evening. How did he know? She whispered. About Boston, about Richard. Quinn sighed, leaning his forearms on the railing. This is a small town at the end of a long stagecoach line. Drivers carry more than mail, they carry gossip, and miners have nothing better to do in the evenings than listen to it and embellish it. So everyone knows about why I left Boston. They know rumors, not facts. He turned to face her. But I'd like to hear the facts from you if you're willing to tell me. Eliza hesitated. She'd kept her secrets close, sharing them with no one, but there was something about Quinn Kincaid that made her want to trust him. Richard Harrington was one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. My father is a banker, and a business arrangement between them led to an introduction. Richard decided I would make a suitable wife. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. When I refused his proposal, he became insistent. My parents supported his suit. They couldn't understand why I would refuse such an advantageous match. And why did you? Quinn asked quietly. Eliza met his gaze. Because he didn't love me. He wanted a decorative, obedient wife to host his dinner parties and bear his children. And because she hesitated, because there was a darkness in him, he hid it well in society, but I saw glimpses of it in his treatment of servants, in the way he spoke about women when he thought I wasn't listening. I feared what would happen once I was his wife with no recourse. So you ran. I left, she corrected. I chose a different path. I've always had a talent for millinery design. In Boston, it was a hobby. Here, it can be my livelihood, my independence. Quinn was silent for a long moment, looking out at the dark shapes of the surrounding hills. You're braver than most men I know, he finally said. I don't feel brave. Right now, I feel exposed and vulnerable. She wrapped her arms around herself. If Bart Donovan knows about Richard, it's only a matter of time before Richard learns where I am. Would he come after you? Yes, she said without hesitation. Not out of love, but out of pride. He doesn't like losing, especially not something he considers rightfully his. Quinn's jaw tightened. You're not a possession to be claimed. Try telling Richard that, she sighed. Perhaps coming to Copper Creek was a mistake. Where would you go instead? I don't know. Further west, California, perhaps. Quinn turned to her, his expression serious. Don't run again, Eliza. Stand your ground. You've started something here. Don't let fear take it from you. It's not that simple. It can be. He took her hands in his, and the warmth of his touch sent an unexpected thrill through her. If Richard Harrington comes to Copper Creek looking for you, he'll have to deal with me first. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Something shifted in Quinn's gray eyes, a softening that made her breath catch. I know enough. I know you're determined, intelligent, and far too beautiful for your own good. I know you came west seeking freedom, not a husband. And I know that I've thought about little else but you since you stepped off that stage. Eliza felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer night. Mr. Kincaid, Quinn, he corrected. After everything, I think we're past formalities. Quinn, she said, testing the name on her tongue. I came here to establish my independence, not to fall under another man's protection. Protection isn't ownership, he said quietly. It's standing beside someone, not in front of them. The music from inside the schoolhouse drifted out to them, a slower, sweeter melody now. Without asking, Quinn drew her into his arms, one hand at the small of her back, the other still holding hers. They swayed together on the moonlit porch, and Eliza found herself relaxing against him despite her misgivings. They called you a temptress, Quinn murmured against her hair. If that's true, then I'm the one you tempted into faithfulness. Eliza pulled back slightly to look at his face. What do you mean? A half smile touched his lips. I've never wanted to be tied to one woman before, always valued my freedom too much, but since you arrived. He shook his head slightly. Let's just say you've changed my thinking on the matter. Quinn, the schoolhouse door opened, spilling light and music onto the porch. Sarah Cooper stood there, her expression concerned. Is everything all right out here? People are talking. Reality rushed back, and Eliza stepped away from Quinn's embrace. Everything's fine, Mrs. Cooper. I just needed some air after that unpleasantness. Well, you both might want to come back inside. Wilhelmina Greaves is practically turning blue with the effort of holding in her opinions on young women who step out alone with gentlemen. Quinn chuckled. Heaven forbid we give Wilhelmina apoplexy. Shall we, Miss Tucker? He offered his arm. Eliza took it, but as they followed Sarah inside, she whispered, This conversation isn't over. I'm counting on that, he replied, and the promise in his voice made her shiver despite the warm evening. The remainder of the social passed without incident, though Eliza was acutely aware of the speculative glances cast her way. She danced with several other men, including the sheriff and Mr. Cooper, but her thoughts remained fixed on Quinn and the unexpected declaration he'd made on the porch. By the time he escorted her back to the hotel, the moon was high and Copper Creek had largely settled for the night, with only the saloon still showing lights and signs of life at her door. She turned to face him. Thank you for defending me tonight. I meant what I said, Eliza, all of it. His voice was low, intimate in the quiet hallway. I believe you did. She hesitated, then added, "But my situation is complicated. Richard is back in Boston," Quinn finished for her, "and if he shows his face in Copper Creek, he'll find you're not alone anymore." "I need time to think," she said honestly. Quinn nodded. "Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so courtly it seemed out of place coming from a frontier rancher. "Good night, Eliza Tucker. Good night, Quinn." Inside her room, Eliza sank onto the edge of her bed, her mind whirling with the events of the evening. Bart Donovan's drunken accusations had shaken her, bringing the specter of Richard Harrington back into her life just when she'd thought herself free. And then there was Quinn Kincaid, with his unexpected declaration and the disturbing effect he had on her carefully constructed defenses. She'd come west to escape one man's possessive attention, not to invite another's. But Quinn was nothing like Richard, she had to admit. Where Richard had been coldly possessive, Quinn offered protection without demanding ownership. Where Richard had seen her as an ornament to his social standing, Quinn seemed to value her strength and independence. Still, it was too soon. She needed to establish herself in Copper Creek, to prove to herself as much as to others that she could stand on her own. The following weeks were busy ones as Eliza prepared for the shop's opening. Her supplies from Denver arrived, and she spent long hours creating displays and working on initial designs. Sarah Cooper continued to be a steadfast friend, introducing her to more of the town's women and helping spread word about the shop's imminent opening. Quinn Kincaid made himself scarce, seemingly understanding her need for space. She caught glimpses of him in town, occasionally loading supplies at the mercantile, deep in conversation with the sheriff, but he made no attempt to pursue their conversation from the night of the social. She told herself she was relieved, but the truth was more complex. She missed his company, his dry wit, and the way he looked at her as if he could see beneath her carefully maintained facade. The day of the shop's grand opening dawned clear and bright. Eliza had prepared a selection of ready-made hats as well as samples of custom designs. Sarah had helped her arrange for refreshments, tea, and small cakes to entice customers. The first hour was slow, with only a few curious townswomen venturing in. But by mid-morning, the shop was comfortably full, with ladies trying on hats and discussing fabrics and trimmings with animated interest. "You've created quite a stir," Sarah commented as she helped serve tea. "Even Wilhelmina Greaves is eyeing that purple velvet toque." Eliza smiled. "Business is better than I dared hope." "It's not just your hats, though they're lovely," Sarah said quietly. "It's you. You've shown these women that a lady can make her own way, even in a place like Copper Creek." The compliment warmed Eliza, reinforcing her conviction that she'd made the right choice in coming west. She was in the midst of discussing a custom order with the banker's wife when a hush fell over the shop. Standing in the doorway was a man Eliza had hoped never to see again. Tall, impeccably dressed in an Eastern suit that looked ridiculously out of place in Copper Creek, with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them, Richard Harrington had found her. "Eliza, my dear," he said, his cultured voice carrying across the suddenly silent shop. "What a charming little establishment you've created, though I must say it's a far cry from the Harrington mansion on Beacon Hill." Eliza's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it, but she kept her expression composed. "Mr. Harrington, this is a surprise." "Surely not, my dear. Did you think I wouldn't find you?" His smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "You've led me on quite a chase." "I wasn't aware I was being chased," Eliza replied, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "As I recall, our association ended when I declined your proposal." Richard's smile tightened. "A temporary setback. Your father and I have come to an understanding. He's quite eager to see you return to Boston as my wife." The shop had emptied quickly, the women of Copper Creek recognizing a private confrontation when they saw one. Only Sarah remained, hovering protectively near Eliza. My father has no authority to promise my hand, Mr. Harrington. I'm of age and making my own way now. Richard glanced dismissively around the small shop. Playing shopkeeper in this frontier outpost? Come now, Eliza, you've made your point. It's time to return to civilization and take up your proper place in society. My proper place is wherever I choose it to be, Eliza replied, anger beginning to override her fear. And I choose to be here, not in Boston, and certainly not as your wife. Richard's facade of pleasantness slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You seem to misunderstand the situation. Your father's bank is in considerable difficulty. My investment is all that stands between him and ruin. He has given me his blessing to bring you home by whatever means necessary. Are you threatening me, Mr. Harrington? Eliza's voice sharpened, merely stating facts. Your childish rebellion has consequences beyond yourself. Think of your family, Eliza. Your mother's health is delicate. Would you have her reduced to poverty in her declining years? It was a cruel blow, precisely aimed at her greatest vulnerability, her love for her family. Eliza felt her resolve waver. I need time to consider. Of course, I've taken a room at the hotel. We can discuss the details of our return journey over dinner this evening. Richard's confidence was absolute, as if her capitulation was a foregone conclusion. 7 o'clock. With a curt nod to Sarah, he turned and left, the shop bell jingling in his wake. As soon as he was gone, Eliza sank onto a nearby chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. He found me, she whispered, and he's using my family against me. Sarah knelt beside her, concern etching her kind face. Eliza, you can't seriously be considering going back with that man. There's something wrong about him. You don't understand if what he says about my father's bank is true. Eliza pressed her fingers to her temples. I couldn't bear to be the cause of my family's ruin. There has to be another way. Sarah squeezed her hand. Talk to Quinn, he might know. No, Eliza interrupted. I can't involve Quinn in this. This is my problem to solve. But he cares for you. Everyone can see it. That's precisely why I can't involve him. Richard is dangerous in his way. I won't put Quinn at risk. Eliza stood, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. I need to think. Would you mind closing the shop for me? I need to walk to clear my head. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, though her worried expression made it clear she thought Eliza was making a mistake. Eliza left through the back door, wanting to avoid the main street where she might encounter Richard again. Her mind raced as she walked aimlessly, eventually finding herself at the edge of town near the creek that gave Copper Creek its name. The water burbled peacefully over smooth stones, oblivious to her turmoil. Eliza sank onto a flat rock, staring at the flowing current as if it might carry away her problems. Richard's appearance had shattered the fragile sense of security she'd begun to build in Copper Creek. She'd known, intellectually, that he might come after her, but seeing him in her shop, so confident and coldly manipulative, had brought home the reality of her situation. If she returned to Boston with him, she'd be sacrificing her freedom, possibly for the rest of her life. Richard wasn't a man who forgave or forgot. He would ensure she had no further opportunities to escape. But if she refused, her family might suffer terribly. Her father's pride would be devastated by financial ruin, and her mother, always delicate, might not survive the shock and subsequent hardship. Thought I might find you here. Quinn's voice startled her. She looked up to find him standing a few feet away, his expression concerned. Sarah sent me, he explained, taking a cautious step closer. Said you had an unwelcome visitor from Boston. Richard Harrington, Eliza confirmed, too weary to dissemble. He's come to take me back, and are you going? Quinn's voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his jaw. I don't know. She looked back at the creek. He's threatening my family's financial ruin if I don't return and marry him. Quinn sat beside her on the rock, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him but not touching. Men like that, men who use threats to get what they want, they don't change, Eliza. If you go back now, you'll spend the rest of your life under his control. Don't you think I know that? She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. But what choice do I have? I can't be responsible for my family's destruction. There's always a choice. Quinn's gaze was steady on her face. Let me help you find it. This isn't your fight, Quinn. It became my fight the moment he threatened you. His hand covered hers, warm and strong. I told you before, you're not alone anymore. Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes. Why would you involve yourself in my troubles? We barely know each other. Quinn was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. When I was younger, he finally said, I watched my sister make the mistake you're contemplating. She married a man she feared rather than loved because she thought it was her duty. He broke her spirit piece by piece until there was nothing left of the vibrant girl I'd grown up with. I'm sorry, Eliza whispered, understanding now some of the shadows Sarah had mentioned. I couldn't save her, but I can try to save you. He turned to face her fully. Let me confront Harrington. No, he's dangerous, Quinn, not with his fists perhaps, but in other ways. He has connections, money, influence. So do I in this territory at least. Quinn's expression hardened. And I'm not without resources of my own. What do you mean? I mean that before I came west, I was a lawyer in St. Louis. A good one. His mouth quirked in that almost smile. The mines were just a means to an end, a way to earn enough to buy land, but I still know the law and I still have connections back east who owe me favors. Eliza stared at him, seeing him in a new light. You never mentioned you were a lawyer. It never came up, he shrugged. Most people out here don't care what you were before, they only care who you are now. And who are you now, Quinn Kincaid? She asked softly. His gray eyes held hers. A man who's found something worth fighting for. The simple declaration struck Eliza to her core. In that moment, looking into Quinn's steady gaze, she made her decision. I won't run again. I won't let Richard drive me from the life I'm building here. Relief and admiration flashed across Quinn's face. That's the spirit. Now tell me everything you know about your father's bank and his dealings with Harrington. Leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem. As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, Eliza and Quinn talked strategy. His legal mind quickly grasped the potential weaknesses in Richard's position, and by the time they walked back toward town, Eliza felt the first stirrings of hope. Remember, Quinn said as they reached the edge of town, let me do most of the talking. Harrington expects you to be intimidated and alone. Let's surprise him. Dinner with Richard proved to be unlike anything Eliza had anticipated. She arrived at the hotel dining room precisely at 7, dressed in her best gown but with Quinn at her side. Richard's face when he saw them together was a study in controlled fury. Mr. Harrington, Quinn said pleasantly, extending his hand. Quinn Kincaid. I understand you've been threatening Miss Tucker. Richard ignored the offered hand. This is a private dinner, sir. I don't recall inviting you. Miss Tucker invited me. Quinn pulled out Eliza's chair with exaggerated courtesy. As her legal representative. Legal representative. Richard's eyebrows rose. I was not aware that Miss Tucker required legal counsel for a family matter. Blackmail is hardly a family matter, Mr. Harrington, Quinn replied, his voice still pleasant but with steel beneath the surface. It's a criminal offense. I don't know what Miss Tucker has told you. She's told me enough, Quinn interrupted. Enough to know that your threat to ruin her father financially, unless she marries you, constitutes criminal coercion under territorial law. Richard's confidence faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. You mistake a private conversation for something sinister. I merely pointed out the potential consequences of Eliza's continued absence from Boston. Her father and I have business arrangements that depend upon our families being united. Then perhaps you should reconsider those arrangements, Quinn suggested, because Miss Tucker won't be returning to Boston with you now or ever. Richard's cold gaze shifted to Eliza. Is this poorly dressed frontier lawyer speaking for you now, Eliza? Have you fallen so far from society's graces that you'd align yourself with such a man? Eliza met his gaze steadily. Mr. Kincaid speaks with my full authority, Richard. And yes, I have chosen to align myself with him, a man of integrity and honor over you. You'll regret this decision, Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. When your father loses everything, about that, Quinn interrupted again. I took the liberty of sending telegrams to some former colleagues in Boston this afternoon. It seems the rumors of Tucker Banking and Trust's imminent collapse have been greatly exaggerated. In fact, according to my sources, the bank is quite solid, which makes one wonder why you would claim otherwise. Richard's face paled slightly. You're bluffing. The telegraph lines to Boston work perfectly well, Quinn finished for him. And my associates were most interested to hear about your claim of having invested in Tucker Banking and Trust, especially since, according to them, you've been quietly selling your shares in the bank over the past month. Eliza gasped. You've been selling your investment. But that means, Quinn said, that Mr. Harrington has been deliberately attempting to drive down the bank's stock value through rumors of instability, rumors he himself started while divesting himself of his own shares. A classic market manipulation scheme and highly illegal. Richard's composure cracked. You can't prove any of this. Perhaps not to the standards of a Boston court, Quinn acknowledged, but out here we take a dim view of men who threaten women. The sheriff is a personal friend, Mr. Harrington. One word from Miss Tucker and you'll find yourself in a most uncomfortable cell until proper authorities can be consulted. A tense silence fell over the table. Richard's gaze moved between Quinn and Eliza, calculating his options. Furthermore, Quinn continued, I've taken the liberty of drafting a telegram to Mr. Tucker, explaining the situation and recommending he consult with banking authorities regarding possible market manipulation. I haven't sent it yet, but I will if you don't leave Copper Creek on tomorrow morning's stage. You're making a grave mistake, Richard said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Both of you. The only mistake, Eliza said quietly, was my failure to see your true character sooner, Richard. I won't make that mistake again. Richard stood abruptly. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Quinn contradicted. Stage leaves at 8 tomorrow. I suggest you be on it. With a final venomous glance at them both, Richard stalked from the dining room. As soon as he was gone, Eliza sagged in her chair. Do you think he'll leave? He doesn't have much choice. He knows I'll follow through on my threats. Quinn covered her hand with his. It's over, Eliza. You're free. The full impact of what had just happened washed over her. My father's bank, is it really safe? Quinn nodded. From what my contacts told me, it's on solid footing. Richard was bluffing, trying to manipulate you through fear. And the telegraph messages, your contacts in Boston, a sheepish grin crossed Quinn's face. Well, I might have exaggerated the extent of my recent communications. The telegraph office was closed by the time we got back to town. But I do have contacts in Boston, and I will send those messages if necessary. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside Eliza, part relief, part lingering tension, part pure joy at her newfound freedom. Quinn Kincaid, you are a devious man. Only when necessary, he assured her, his eyes crinkling with amusement. I find that bullies like Harrington fold quickly when confronted with their own tactics. They ordered dinner, though Eliza found her appetite diminished by the evening's events. As they ate, Quinn told her more about his education at Harvard Law, his practice in St. Louis, and the personal tragedy that had driven him west. My sister's death changed everything, he explained. Her husband was never legally culpable, he was too careful for that, but I knew he was responsible. When I couldn't get justice for her through the law, I decided to leave it all behind. So you came west to escape, just as I did, Eliza observed. At first, yes, but eventually I discovered that I hadn't escaped anything. The pain, the guilt, it all came with me. His gaze held hers. It wasn't until I stopped running that I began to heal. And now, she asked softly. Now I have a good life. The ranch, horses I love working with, friends I trust. His fingers traced patterns on the tablecloth near her hand. But something was missing until you stepped off that stage. Eliza felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Quinn, I'm not proposing, Eliza," he said quickly. "Not yet. You came west to find independence, and I respect that. I'm just telling you that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." The promise in his words wrapped around her heart, warming her from the inside out. "Thank you for everything you did tonight." "My pleasure." His smile was genuine, especially the look on Harrington's face when I mentioned the sheriff's cell. They finished dinner and Quinn walked her back to her hotel room. At her door, he paused. "I'll be at the stage depot tomorrow morning. Make sure Harrington leaves as promised." "I should be there too," Eliza said. Quinn shook his head. "Better not. If he sees you, it might provoke him further. Let me handle this last part." She wanted to argue but recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. "Very well. Will you let me know when he's gone, first thing?" He hesitated, then bent and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Eliza. Sleep well." "Good night, Quinn." True to his word, Quinn appeared at her shop the next morning just after 9, his expression satisfied. "He's gone. Stage left on time with Harrington on it." Relief washed through Eliza. "Thank you. I can hardly believe it's over." "Believe it." Quinn's smile was warm. "Now you can focus on building your business without looking over your shoulder," and build she did. Over the next months, Eliza's millinery shop flourished beyond her expectations. Women from surrounding towns and ranches made the journey to Copper Creek specifically to visit her shop, and she began receiving orders from as far away as Denver. Her relationship with Quinn developed slowly, naturally. He respected her need for independence, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They rode together on Sundays, exploring the beautiful country around Copper Creek. He taught her to fish in the mountain streams and took her to see the wild horses that roamed the high meadows. In turn, she shared her knowledge of literature and art, subjects he'd studied in his youth but had little opportunity to discuss in the frontier town. They debated philosophy under the stars and read poetry to each other beside his fireplace on cold evenings. Quinn introduced her to his ranch, a thriving operation with some of the finest horses in the territory. Eliza discovered a natural affinity for the animals, particularly a spirited mare named Starlight that Quinn had been trying, unsuccessfully, to gentle. "She likes you," he observed with wonder as the normally skittish mare allowed Eliza to stroke her nose. "She won't let anyone else near her." "We understand each other," Eliza said simply. "We both value our freedom." As winter settled over Copper Creek, bringing snow to the surrounding mountains and quiet evenings by the fire, Eliza found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her west. The frightened woman who had fled Boston seemed a distant memory now, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and more at peace with herself. She sent regular letters to her parents, who had been shocked and then relieved to learn of Richard's true nature. Her father had indeed uncovered evidence of market manipulation, though not enough to bring formal charges. Richard Harrington's reputation in Boston society had suffered, however, and that was satisfaction enough for Eliza. The Christmas social at the schoolhouse was a far different experience from her first town event. Where once she had been regarded with suspicion and gossip, she was now welcomed as an established member of the community. Even Wilhelmina Greaves had thawed toward her, especially after Eliza designed a particularly flattering bonnet for the widow's aging features. Quinn claimed the last dance of the evening, drawing her close as the musicians played a slow waltz. "Happy?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Very." She smiled up at him. "I never imagined finding such contentment in a place so far from everything I knew." "Copper Creek has a way of growing on people," he agreed. "Though I think your contentment has less to do with the town and more to do with what you've built here, your shop, your friendships, your independence. And you," she added softly, "you're a significant part of my happiness, Quinn Kincaid." His arms tightened around her. "I was hoping you might say that." When the dance ended, he didn't lead her back to the refreshment table as she expected. Instead, he took her hand and guided her outside where the winter night was crystal clear, stars blazing overhead in the frosty air. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said, his breath visible in the cold. "For you to feel truly settled here, truly your own woman." "Quinn," Eliza's heart began to race. He took both her hands in his. "When you first came to Copper Creek, people gossiped. They called you a temptress, a woman running from a man who wanted to marry her." "I remember," she said, wincing slightly at the memory of Bart Donovan's drunken accusations. "They were wrong about you, but right about one thing." Quinn's eyes reflected the starlight. "You did tempt someone." "Oh," her voice was barely a whisper. "You tempted me into believing in love again, into wanting a future I'd given up on." His smile was tender. "They called you a temptress. Well, then I'm the one you tempted into faithfulness." Quinn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Eliza. Not your shop, not your independence. I'm asking to share your life, to stand beside you, not in front of you." He opened the box to reveal a ring with a single perfect diamond. "Marry me, be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things." Tears blurred Eliza's vision as joy welled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Quinn Kincaid." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as their lips met in the starlit darkness, Eliza knew she had found not just a home, but a heart to match her own. They were married in the spring, when wildflowers carpeted the meadows around Copper Creek. The entire town turned out for the celebration, even Bart Donovan, now sober and apologetic for his behavior months earlier. Eliza wore a gown of ivory silk with a hat of her own design, a confection of lace and tiny pearls, that Sarah proclaimed the most beautiful creation yet to come from her talented hands. Quinn, resplendent in a new suit, but still wearing his familiar boots, a compromise Eliza had insisted upon, watched her walk toward him with a look of such profound love that it brought tears to the eyes of even the most hardened miners. "I never believed in fate," he told her that night as they sat on the porch of his ranch house, their home, now watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "But I can't help thinking that some greater power guided you to Copper Creek, to me." "Perhaps," Eliza agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Or perhaps we simply found each other because we were both finally ready to stop running and start building something lasting." "Either way," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her hair, "I'm grateful every day that you stepped off that stage and into my life. Even though they called me a temptress," she teased, "especially because of that." His arm tightened around her waist. "Because you tempted me into the greatest happiness I've ever known." In the years that followed, Eliza's millinery shop continued to flourish, expanding to include dressmaking as Copper Creek grew into a proper town with a bank, a school, and eventually a railroad connection. Quinn's horse ranch prospered as well, his reputation for quality stock spreading throughout the territory. They welcomed a daughter, Sarah, named for their dear friend, and later a son, William, who inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's determined spirit. Their home became a gathering place for friends and travelers alike, known for its warmth and hospitality. Occasionally, news would reach them from Boston. Richard Harrington had eventually married a wealthy widow and continued his business endeavors, though never again with the same social standing he had once enjoyed. Eliza felt nothing but distant pity for the woman who had taken the place she had refused. On their 10th anniversary, Quinn surprised Eliza with a special gift, the deed to a building in town, larger and more suitable than her current shop, with living quarters above that could serve as a place to stay when business kept her late in town. "You've outgrown the old location," he explained. "And this way you can take on apprentices like you've been wanting to." "It's perfect," she said, deeply touched by his understanding of her ambitions. "But are you sure you don't mind me spending even more time in town?" Quinn smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "Our arrangement has worked well these 10 years, hasn't it? You have your independence, I have mine, and we share everything that matters." It was true. Their marriage had defied the conventional expectations of their time. Eliza maintained her business and her own identity, while Quinn supported her ambitions wholeheartedly. They were partners in the truest sense, each respecting the other's strengths and dreams. "We scandalized Wilhelmina Greaves at the beginning," Eliza recalled with a laugh. "She's come around," Quinn pointed out, "especially after you made that miraculous hat that convinced Judge Parker to court her." "They do make a surprisingly well-matched couple," Eliza agreed. As twilight deepened around them, Quinn drew her into his arms. "Do you ever regret it?" "Leaving Boston, coming west?" "Never," she said without hesitation. "Everything I value most is here, my children, my friends, my work." She reached up to touch his beloved face. "And you, Quinn Kincaid, the man who saw me for who I truly was, not who society expected me to be." "They called you a temptress," he murmured, echoing the words that had become a private refrain between them. "And you're the one I tempted into faithfulness," she completed, rising on tiptoe to meet his kiss. In that moment, with the vast western sky darkening to indigo above them and the lights of Copper Creek twinkling in the distance, Eliza knew that in running from a future she had feared, she had found one beyond her wildest dreams, a life of love, purpose, and the sweetest freedom of all: to be herself, completely and without apology. And in the years that stretched before them, filled with children's laughter, the satisfaction of work well done, and quiet evenings in each other's arms, both Eliza and Quinn would look back on that fateful day when she had stepped off the stagecoach and recognize it for what it truly was: not an ending, but the most beautiful of beginnings.